Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Inside the Birds TV with Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan, of course, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. And today we are very fortunate to be joined by one of the best in the business. Now, he's saying goodbye, but not before he's going to stop on with us and talk to us about covering the Eagles. And we're going to tell some stories, and we'll get into a little bit of the Eagles as well. But we are very, very, very appreciative to be joined by a true legend, Les Bowen, longtime Eagles beat writer for the Philadelphia Daily News. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention he also covered the Flyers for quite a while, for those old enough to remember that he did that as well. He came here from Charlotte, but he is a Philadelphian right through and through now, Les, and we're really happy to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You wrote in your farewell column in the Daily News or Inquirer or Philly.com, since it's all one big happy family now, that you were going to come to Philadelphia. What I found fascinating about your column was, because I didn't know this about you, is that you kind of came up here because your wife was going to work in Philadelphia anyway, and you started off as a copy desk, like a copy editor, correct? And then somehow snuck your way onto the Eagles. I don't know anybody who has that kind of a talent and ability to do that, but you did. How'd that happen?
Yeah, I'm sort of a backdoor sort of person, I guess. Well, your wife has a really good job. You know how these things go.
We got to marry up, man.
We met at the Charlotte Observer. We were both from Charlotte, but we didn't know each other until we worked there. And at that time, the Charlotte paper was part of Knight Ridder was a huge media company that the Philadelphia papers also were owned by Knight Ridder. So people would move up, like her bosses got hired, in Philadelphia. And sure enough, one of them wanted her to come up. So we married about 6 months at that time. It was a great way to get the marriage kicked off. I was willing to leave. I wasn't that happy with what I was doing. At that time in Charlotte, this was 1983, there were no pro teams. There was no Panthers. There was no Hornets. There was AA baseball. There was the ACC. There was NASCAR, which I've actually written a good bit of back in those days. And in the summer, you could end up interviewing 12-year-old tennis players. It just was not a great sports market. And I didn't feel I was, really progressing. So I was willing to go, but nobody just said, hey, look at these NASCAR sidebars you've written. I'll be glad to hire you as a sports writer in Philadelphia. But we were really lucky because of the people we knew who had come up from Charlotte. I got a line on an opening at the Daily News. They had at that time on the news copy desk, they had a summer job for just somebody that would join the desk, and then people could take their vacations and there'd be an extra person there, the whole summer. So it would all work out. And so I did that, and they liked me, and I hung on. For some reason, they were able to extend that. And then somebody in sports, a sports writer named Mary Flannery, took a maternity leave, and sports said, okay, why don't you come up here for a while? And, that went on for a while. And then it looked like I was going to have to leave. And then they said, how about if you stay? So that was like a year and a half after we got here that I actually became a permanent employee. And I was a copy editor. And it didn't take me too long to realize that I didn't really relish copy editing. It's an important job. It's it's a crucial job that's not being done nearly enough in media these days. But I kind of got tired of cleaning up other people's messes, and I wanted to create my own messes. And so they were very, thank God, the Daily News was very receptive to that. And the late 80s, I started writing again.
Les, working here, and you cover the Flyers and the Eagles. How soon did you know how A, passionate the fan base was here, and B, did you really quite know how big sports would turn out to be here? Eagles, Flyers, Sixers, and Phillies.
Well, that's why, Adam. That's why I'm really glad I had those years as a copy editor, because I was reading, Mark Wicker and Ray Didinger and Stan Hochman and Rich Hoffman and, people like that every night. And it's hard not to learn these things in that position. I was not prepared, coming out of Charlotte to work in this market as a writer initially, but 4 or 5 years, in the market, in sports, even though I wasn't writing, it gave me that grounding, I think. And it certainly gave me the idea that this was where I wanted to work, that this was the place to be a sports writer. I really don't think there's a better city to be a sports writer in. I think New York is much too, unless you're covering the Yankees in New York, I don't really think sports is what it is here in Philly. Chicago is different. LA is different. This is the big city, where sports matters most. Maybe Boston is like that. I don't know, too closely what it's like to work in Boston. But the fact that the Patriots play nearly an hour away from Boston, to me, detracts from the atmosphere there a little bit. But to me, this is the place.
I want to ask you, Les, about just what it was like to kind of say goodbye as you did. First, remind everyone to download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app. You use promo code ITB when you sign up to turn $1 into $100 in free credits. That's $1 into $100 in free credits using the promo code ITB on DraftKings Sportsbook. So you've come here, you've been here for a long time, you've worked your way up, you've been on TV. I mean, everybody knows who Les Bowen is.
For better or worse.
Hey, listen, we're all in that category, right? So how difficult was it for you very recently? You went into a little bit in your column about how you probably were going to ponder retirement next year at this time, but they offered you the buyout, so why not take it now? And I love the Chase Daniel analogy, to make money without doing anything. That was great. But how difficult is it when that's what you do for so long? And just knowing you, I know you still like to write. I can't imagine that you're tired of writing. So how difficult was it to come to that decision and write that column?
Geoff, it was difficult. It really was. There are a lot of factors kind of came into play. One was that my wife, who came up here and worked for the Inquirer, she left journalism a long time ago. She was smart and became a teacher, and she was retiring from teaching. And, that was an impetus. Both of our boys live a long way away. One's in Denver, one's in Baton Rouge. Then we got a new sports editor, a new regime coming in. And the guy, Michael Wang, he seems like a very nice, very smart guy, but he doesn't know me really, and I don't know him. I had worked for somebody, Pat McClune, that I started working with in the mid-'80s on the copy desk. Wow. At the Daily News, someone I've known most of my life. That it's just different, and I think our coverage is going to be different. I'm not saying worse or anything like that, but I think there are a lot of ideas in the industry now that are just not what I do well, what I came here to do, what I, how I envision it being or should be. And, again, and then there was the fact that I was only planning to do it one more year. I wanted to get, after the COVID year, I was kind of thinking, okay, get a normal year in, go to the owners' meetings, things like that, the combine, and then wave goodbye to everybody. But you can't have everything, I mean, I've been incredibly lucky in my career. And they offered basically to pay me as if I were going to be doing all those things and just leave this summer. So I thought about it and I decided to take it. And I think it was probably the right decision. And I think the new sports editor deserves to be able to hire his people. I think he's going to be under a lot of pressure to get digital subscriptions up and to really, find the magic key to making media pay in this age we're in. God bless him. Mm-hmm. And if he's going to be tasked with that, I think he should be able to, for me to be hanging around for one more year, like a, 35-year-old left tackle or something on a rebuilding team is, that, no, I'm willing to step aside.
Les, one of the unique parts of your career is that not only were you a journalist in print, you got to work in television on Comcast's Daily News Live. for many years. You and I appeared together. Geoff did as well. What was that experience like going in there and doing a little bit differently, not writing, but actually speaking on television?
It was really, really different, Adam. It was, they didn't give us a lot of prep. I mean, one of the reasons we had that show initially in 1997 was that Comcast was a bare bones operation. They needed us. In fact, those early years, not only did I do Daily News Live, but they would have, I don't know if you remember this, but before Flyers games, I'd be doing stand-ups from the Zamboni time.
No, I didn't know that.
You know, because they didn't have anybody there, you know.
Wow.
In fact, that became a running joke because one time at Madison Square Garden, the Zamboni came off the ice and sort of bumped me out of the way while I was on the air. And from then on, if there was a Zamboni on the ice and I was doing the stand-up, somebody on the set would yell, "Look out, Les!" But
Great.
yeah, it was amazing. It was really interesting. I learned a lot. I think for much of the run of that show, the fact that it was in addition to everything else we were doing was an impediment. There were days when I was like, oh my God, I've got 3 things to write. I've got to check on this. I've got to check on that. And I've got to get over there and do this show, you know, and it was, I wish I had treasured it more or the opportunity more, you know. I definitely wish that it had been set up differently. A lot of times we had no idea what the hell we were going to be doing or who we were going to be interviewing until we stepped on the set. You know, there'd be some guy with a book and we didn't know, you know, what book is this? I haven't read it. You know, I mean, sometimes it was uncomfortable. But Michael Barkan did a wonderful job as the host. He smoothed things out quite a bit. But the original show was 90 minutes. For several years, it was 90 minutes. That's a long time to be on television. Mm-hmm. And they didn't even have a lot of highlights at that point. It was just us sitting there talking for 90 minutes. So yeah, it was really fun, really interesting. And that is, without a doubt, that's how most people in fandom know me, you know, mm-hmm. And it's kind of depressing because writing is really what I focused on in my career. But to this day, you know, that's what people remember is that I was on TV.
That's true. I mean, people will walk by and be like, that's Les, but how many times did you get, right? That's Les Bowen. I see you on TV all the time, but they will not talk to you about any article you wrote, right? They just say, I just saw you on TV all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It was good for us writers as far as our marketability to be able to do that and be known for that. Yes. It was. But you're right. It certainly came with some obstacles as well. I do want to ask you a little bit about the Eagles, just like your perception on them over the years. First, I'm going to remind everyone to not be a loser. Don't pay full retail price for the things you want. Get on Deal Dash. Go to DealDash.com or download the Deal Dash app. And when you register, use the promo code ITB for a special offer for some bonus free bids. Les, you've many coaching changes, a couple of regime changes, a lot of feast or famine in the Eagles over the last 20, 25 years. What is your kind of big takeaway from covering this organization as thoroughly as you've had for over 2 decades, if I'm correct on that? So what
almost 2 decades.
Almost 2 decades, right. What's your big takeaway on this organization?
Oh gosh, that's a hell of a question. It is the centerpiece of Philadelphia sports, and I don't think the organization as a whole has handled that very well during much of the time that I've been involved in covering it. I think Jeff Lurie could be a much more engaged with the fan base owner. I think over the years, through people like Joe Banner and even now with Howie, there's been a real distance there. There's been a lack of trust or a real adversarial feel toward the local media that in most cases is just trying to do its job. I don't think very many of us really go to work every day thinking, okay, what nasty can I say about the Eagles today? We're generally trying to help them. I mean, not consciously, but most coverage is positive by the nature of it. It's like, who's going to win this battle? Who's going to, hey, here's something you didn't know about this player. There's no reason not to embrace that and to give that, access and to be engaged with the media. And instead, I think the overall tone of the organization, quite frankly, has been one of, trying to work around the media through their website, and limit the media as much as possible and keep the media at arm's length, and the fans, it's in some ways as well. I think it's in many ways a well-run organization. Other than that, I did an Eagles history book about a decade ago. And the one thing I really learned in researching that book is Eagles ownership has been terrible over the years. Jeffrey Lurie is by far the best owner the Eagles have ever had. The only one to build a practice facility or a stadium. I mean, this is a team that was sold between winning the 48 and 49 championships. I mean, they just never had good ownership. Leonard Toews wasn't a good owner. He was colorful. Norman Brayman certainly was not a good owner. I mean, it's just never been. That's why the franchise had so many horrible decades. It was a couple of guys scraping some pennies together to own the team until Lurie came along. So it is a much more professionally run organization in the football side. The success of the last 2 decades is far beyond anything that ever came before that on a consistent basis. I mean, you have to acknowledge that. But I think it could be a much more, it could be a friendlier organization. It could be a more, like the Phillies have been pretty much during the time that I've been here. It could be much less, like I said, arm's length to people.
Les, speaking of that success that they've had, what was 2017 like covering that Super Bowl run, which I think most of us would say was unexpected? What was that experience like for you, covering as closely as you did?
I wish I could do it over again, Adam. It went by so fast, and we didn't understand what was going to, you don't know in the process that this is what's going to happen. And so many things happened that year, and it was so, the Jay Ajayi trade was a huge, that during the season, that was a game changer, I think, for that team. Some of those free agent signings that year that weren't really thought of as big deals, like Patrick Robinson and even Chris Long, Jernigan, the defensive tackle. Those turned out to be huge, and you didn't grasp that until the end, really. I mean, and you had that week. We spent a week in Southern California between the Seattle and Rams games. That was weird, and that was like nothing else I've ever covered. We were practicing in the Angels Stadium, and then Carson Wentz gets hurt. And, I had the next few weeks, I had a lot of national media calling me up, asking me, what I thought of how the Eagles were going to do now. And I was like, well, they're still a good team. They can win around in the playoffs, but they're certainly not going to win the Super Bowl. Of course. That was how I felt. I mean, that was my honest feeling.
Sure.
And now, after they killed the Vikings in the NFC Championship game, then I started to think they could win the Super Bowl. But until that moment, frankly, I didn't see it coming. I really didn't. And I remember sitting there in Minneapolis in the stadium, US Bank Stadium, as the final minutes bled away. Of course, it was up for grabs. It wasn't like they were ahead by 20 points or anything. I was trying to feverishly write. I was writing about Doug Peterson that night. And I remember telling myself, stop for a second. Look around you and sort of take this in. So you remember, I mean, you're stuck there, what it's like, Geoff, with your screen, and you're pounding on these keys, and there's, all kinds of stuff going on, and you're just sort of in a different place, and especially after they did win it, and I'm trying to file. Even as I was filing, I like took pictures of the confetti falling and stuff like that. I just didn't want to be. I wanted to be in the moment somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember, Les. It's funny because beat writers, and maybe I shouldn't reveal all the beat writer secrets. We tend to be moody about the team depending on how the team is doing. And I remember 2008 when they were 5-6-1, and then it looked like things were bad for Donovan. He gets benched. Kevin Cobb comes in. Then next Thursday, Donovan's back. He throws 3 touchdowns on Thanksgiving, and then they rally and they make it to the playoffs. And we're all thinking the same thing. This is nice, but we know it's not going to be a Super Bowl run. But then they beat, what was it, the Vikings, and then they beat the Giants, or vice versa. And then, lo and behold, they're back in the NFC Championship game against the Cardinals, right? And that was out in Arizona. And now I couldn't go because my wife was this close to giving birth. Unfortunately, I missed that NFC Championship game.
I did go that.
Yeah, I went to the Pittsburgh-Baltimore AFC game, but the intel I got back was it was the first time we were in a press box. You had the Arizona writers who were like all into it. Yeah, we want to go to the Super Bowl. And the Eagles writers like, yeah, we want you guys to win and go to the Super Bowl because nobody really believed. So that's kind of a look into side. Sometimes when you just know it's not going to happen, you're just ready to kind of wrap it up and put a bow on the season. I promised our listeners, and I promised this to Adam because he has not heard this story yet, or if he did, he didn't remember it. And I promised the listeners and our tees that I was going to give a good Les Bowen from the Andy Reid days story.
Oh God.
I'm sure you will. I know you well. You will not have any issue discussing this. This is about a question you once asked Andy and his answer that kind of became a drop for every radio station. You know what I'm talking about, right?
There are a couple of these, actually.
The one where he specifically wants you to, it was after a win, but it may not have been the most aesthetically pleasing win, and you felt like you had to ask some things that didn't go right. Do you remember this now?
Okay, is this the one about hockey?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah. I do.
No, now you take it from there. So create the scene for us.
I barely remember the question that I asked, but he basically said, "This isn't hockey, Les."
Yeah. And then he told you to enjoy the win, right? Didn't he?
Yeah. And
enjoy the win, Les.
I got all kinds of cred out of things like that, out of little things with Andy. But the thing is, Andy and I had a very good relationship, and in fact, I still, I don't now because I'm retired, but until last week, I would text him a lot. And if I was doing like a story on a trend or something, he always got back to me. One time on game day, like a few hours before a Chiefs game, I didn't intend for him to, I was like, I texted him like, take a look at this when you have a chance. He was like on the phone with me, before their game, giving me an answer to something,
That's awesome.
For somehow, this is coming out of a joke with the guys from the Inquirer that I work with, but somehow I'm the favorite writer of former Eagles coaches. When I did my retirement thing the other day, I got a nice Twitter thing from Lee Montville, the famous Boston Globe writer, who was always an idol writer. Of mine.
Yeah.
And so I thanked him very profusely. And he said, "Oh, Bud, I forgot this, but he's a good friend of Chip's."
I was just going to ask you.
And he said, "Oh, by the way, Chip Kelly always said you were the best writer in film."
Who would have known he thought that about you, right?
Yeah. And at this point, it does me very little good, Chip. Maybe when I knocked on your door the night you were fired, you could have come to the door and said, "Gee, Les, here's what I think." That would have been useful. But
I got to ask you about Chip. That was actually where I wanted to go next. I didn't know him super well. I was a beat reporter, so my relationship with him would be kind of different. But I did get to know him. What was your view of him, and what was your relationship with him as a reporter and him as a head coach?
I thought he was really fascinating, Adam. And I admit now I was completely wrong in the early days. I wasn't wrong that he was fascinating. He was, but I thought it was all going to work. I was very on board initially. I mean, they went 10-6 the year after going 4-12. I just thought he had a lot of great ideas. I thought he was smart, and he is. I did not see right away the other elements of his personality that eventually caused his demise. He liked to, I kind of enjoyed his press conferences were frustrating, but there was a sort of playfulness to it in willfully ignoring your point and trying to twist things some other way that I was like, it was kind of almost fun sometimes to sort of spar with the guy, and ironically, it was one of those moments in a press conference that I think got him fired. If you remember, Howard Eskin asked a question in a day after press conference, after the next to last game, about it. Howard prefaced the question with, you're the general manager, how come these players aren't, blah, blah, blah. So Chip's father was a lawyer, and Chip's favorite device in these press conferences was to seize on some small inaccuracy or something you had stated the wrong way and use that as an excuse to not answer the question. Mm-hmm. So Chip went right there. Oh, I'm not the general manager. You'd have to ask the general manager that. Well, technically, he was not the general manager. Howie Roseman still had that title, but everyone knew that Chip was making the personnel decisions. And I am told that Jeffrey Lurie saw that and heard that and just that's it, Mm-hmm. When Chip was just trying to be clever and trying to be Chip, he didn't want to answer Howard's question about the personnel moves that he had made. So he thought he had a loophole, and that was kind of Chip, but to this day, I did a story on the new special teams guy who worked for Chip, in San Francisco and here. And I got Chip, I texted Chip and he was happy to talk to me.
That's amazing.
I wish I wish he had been. I don't understand how a guy who was such an innovator in college, the reason his teams didn't use the fullback was that one year at New Hampshire, he didn't have a fullback and he had to figure out a way around that. Mm-hmm. But in the NFL, he was exactly the opposite of that. Everything had to be a certain way. You couldn't do anything differently. Mm-hmm. You couldn't adjust. I don't, to this day, I would love to sit down with him and talk about that.
I'm sure he'd be really excited to talk about. Yeah. Actually, Chip probably would, all these years later, probably not mind opening up a little bit if he would ever just sit down and do that. Last one I'll throw at you, Les, is this will probably be another, you could have 3 hours, but in your almost 20 years of being an Eagles writer, when you look back, when you have grandkids that say, what was the coolest thing about being an Eagles beat writer for 20 years? Your answer will be what?
Well, it's boring, but it has to be Super Bowl 52. I mean, that was the crowning achievement of the franchise and all of its however many years of history. For years, I covered all those Andy Reid teams and heard about 1960 and saw those guys, the 1960 guys. They would parade them out at various anniversaries and things and, interviewed them about what it was like and all that. And to be there when they finally won it all was probably the most memorable moment. Less boring would be the summer of TO in 2005 at Lehigh. That was extremely memorable for another reason. Mm-hmm. I'd never been through anything like that before, and I never want to again.
And I don't blame you.
You're right.
Les, those were my first days on the beat, so I knew I can't believe what I've gotten myself into. I was there for Drew Rosenhaus.
Thing real quick about that. Yeah. So I covered the whole Eric Lindros thing with the Flyers. Right?
Oh God. Yeah.
So most people know Eric Lindros came to the Flyers on a trade that was screwed up and had to be decided by an arbitrator, and it worked out terribly for the Flyers. Really, I mean, Eric was a great player, but the other two teams involved won Stanley Cups, and the Flyers didn't, and it ended in acrimony. So the Eagles got T.O. in a very similar way. There was a dispute with the Baltimore Ravens that had to be decided by an arbitrator. And I wrote about that because I had covered both of them at the time. When the Eagles acquired T.O., I wrote about this, got an email from the Flyers lawyer, a guy named Phil Weinberg, who remember, and at the end of the email, he says, yeah, let's hope this doesn't end like that did.
Oh, instead it's exactly
exactly like that did.
Oh, you can't make that up, man. You cannot make that up. Les, it was great catching up with you. I have a feeling, and you alluded to it in your column, that it's not like you're just done writing. You'll still be doing some things, maybe.
Yeah, I'm a free agent. If anybody out there has any ideas, I don't want to, be rushing to my laptop every time a second round draft pick gets signed or something. But I am interested in writing, and I think I can still put a sentence together. I haven't done it in a few days, but.
Well, you're such a good long form writer, and that's kind of such a lost art. I feel like that's something you've always enjoyed too, really getting into the nuts and bolts of something. But do you feel anymore, and maybe this is partly your decision to kind of step away now, do you feel like long form is valued in any everyday journalism now the way it used to be?
You see these big pieces that people do, but they're not every day. They're like something you read once a week or something. And I don't know the answer to that, Geoff. I think there's value if it's a subject that hasn't been explored deeply or somebody you didn't know enough about. But I think writing in general is being devalued across the business. There's so much, here's my 5 ideas about such and such. Well, that's, everybody has to make a living, but that's not writing. It's just, writing was different 30 or 40 years ago. I can't explain that to people who weren't there, but the days when you venerated the guys who wrote for Sports Illustrated, or the people, there were women too. That it's an era that's gone, and life moves on, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not. When I got into this business in 1978, I wanted to be one of those people.
No doubt about it. I know the feeling. When I got on the Eagles beat, as I tweeted the other day, I would always read you, Rich Hoffman. I would read Bill Lyon, even though he wasn't on the Eagles beat at the time. He was just so good. But I would read all the Eagles beat writers. And so you helped me a lot. I have to thank you, first of all. When I jumped on as a young writer, you kind of showed me some things that I would have had no idea what to do. But then you also drove me out of the business, because I would read you and I'd be like, I got no shot. This guy's like Mark Twain, and I'm, stringing together ABC. But
no,
so
you
thank
did
you.
a very good job. And I think you have done an amazing, this is an awful terrain these days for younger people, trying to move around, and the jobs are scarce. The jobs disappear. They come and they go. Adam knows this too, and I think you've both done an amazing job of reinventing yourselves and finding ways to make a living in this business. At 65, I'm not, I could figure out a way to reinvent myself. That's part of the reason I'm leaving, is I think to stay at the Inquirer, I kind of have to reinvent myself a little bit. And I'm not up for that. I hate to be that way, but at some point you're like, I am what I am, and I don't want to sound like Ben Simmons.
No, I hear you. You've already reinvented yourself a lot anyway. I mean, from getting on social media way back when, it's not like you've not adapted. You've done an excellent job, whereas a lot of people got lost and were funneled out way before you.
That is really true. Yes.
Geoff, let me add one thing.
Yeah,
I just want to add, I will miss our dinners at the Weber Grill. Nothing like it at the Combine, Geoff. We very quick story. I thought it was a joke when at the Combine in Indy, downtown Indy, that the Weber Grill had their own restaurant. This can't be real. So for many years, I'm not joking, I would pass it. I wouldn't go in because I thought it was a joke. What could they possibly do? So we went in, me, you, maybe Damo too, Paul Domowich. And for a bunch of years, we went there. What a great meal. But I love those meals. It was like a Sunday night before we'd fly home. Used to love those meals.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'll miss stuff like that so much. More than the work, really. I'll miss the people and the press boxes and the trips. I won't miss Geoff. I won't miss that 6 a.m. flight out of Dallas after a night game. With a
Always
full
on
day of work
Christmas
ahead.
Eve or
Yeah.
something like that, or Thanksgiving. No, I wouldn't. I
Christmas
don't
at
miss those.
at the Dallas Airport Marriott South. No,
Yep.
but there is a lot I will miss.
I definitely hear that. Les, thanks for always being you. You're great. We've really enjoyed you. Well, a little sad to see you step away, but I totally get it. And I hope you are still active in the market. And who knows? Maybe ITB could use a little long form. We'll have to have a discussion about that sometime down the road. So really appreciate everything you've done for me and for the industry and for Eagles fans and reporters. You're a legend, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks to both of you, and good luck.
Thank you. All right, make sure you see our friends at Sky Motor Cars. You can check them out at skymotorcars.com. If you're looking to trade in, you'll get the most money for your automobile. So we thank Sky Motor Cars, Deal Dash, DraftKings, and of course, our friend Les Bowen. For Les Bowen and Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching ITB TV.